Good afternoon, and welcome to the Community College of Allegheny County and our next Labor and Management Institute Forum, exploring solutions to Pittsburgh's growing skills gap and community-facilitated initiative. And this could not be a more appropriate dialogue to really begin to have that in-depth conversation about where are the gaps, what are the opportunities, and how are we aligning our programming to support future workforce needs. And to give us some opening remarks, it is my pleasure to introduce one of our distinguished alum, Bob Mill.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock, and thank you all for being here today, particularly to our panel. We'll get to the panel in a moment. I'll introduce them. But a couple of comments that I always like to make at this. First of all, I really appreciate you coming here. It's an honor to have you in the audience. And I want to tell you some good news. Several years ago, 2 to be exact, we started the Labor and Management Institute here on campus, where we actually had a program worth 15 credits to students. And for the first time, at least that I am aware of, that labor and management were trained in the same classroom at the same time, being taught by a college professor who brought in speakers of labor and management practitioners. We did a masterful job. I shouldn't say we, they did a masterful job. The curriculum was exceptional, but we had problems with it because of the length of the program. And so after the class ended, we sat back, interviewed the graduates, and asked for some feedback. And what can we do to make it better? And what came back in the feedback was that the curriculum itself was airtight, fantastic. No question there. And we can only thank 2 people for that. Dr. Jackie Cavalier, who was the faculty professor assigned to the program, and with her capable assistant, our friend Charlie McAllister. Charlie, would you stand up? Thanks. Jack? They put the curriculum together that stood the test of that first semester, and then a very critical review by the students and by the administration. I'm happy to tell you that program in its entirety will be started again in September, but in a different format. We will have Saturday classes here on campus, Saturday morning classes. 60% of the program will be taught in the classroom, 40% online. And so that is a major change, major difference. We're putting together all of the final information for that and start to advertise it pretty soon. But we were looking for a larger class with labor and management being taught at the same time. The only place in the country where that's happening. I also wanted to tell you that the board of the advisory board sat down and discussed a topic for this lecture. And a couple of quick comments that sort of set this up. The program is about the jobs gap. And it made me think back to when we started the Labor and Management Institute, a conversation I had with one of our major funders, Morgan O'Brien from People's Gas. And Morgan said to me that the thing about his job that keeps him up at night is not where he's going to get engineers or MBAs or accountants. It's who's going to connect his pipe. That's basically the problem that we're facing today. Who's going to connect the pipe? You're going to hear today lots of information about jobs that are available in the area. A lot about the people who are well prepared, but no jobs in their field. And then you're going to find out how one organization has addressed the problem. And we may learn a lot from the building trades as to how they're preparing for the advent of the cracker in Beaver County. So I'm excited about this. I think this may be one of the most significant lectures we've had in the series because I think it will live beyond today. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our panel. I'm going to introduce you alphabetically and not necessarily in the order in which they are going to speak. And so first, the Vice President of Workforce Development at the Community College of Allegheny County, Teresa Bryant. Teresa? The Executive Director of the Builders Guild of Western Pennsylvania, Mr. Jason Fink. Jason is also a member of the Advisory Committee. The Executive Director of the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, Dr. Linda Hippert. Linda? Also a member of the Advisory Committee, the Business Manager of the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 66, Jim Kunz. By the way, Jim Kunz did have his fingers in that curriculum as well. And the Campus President for North Campus and the West Hills Center of the Community College of Allegheny County, Dr. Gretchen Mullen-Sawicki. The Chief Executive Officer of Three Rivers Workforce Investment Board, Stephanie Pashman. The Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Black Political Empowerment Project, also called BPEP, Tim Stevens, who also isn't all that bad a jazz man either. And the Chief Executive Officer of the Allegheny Conference on Community Development, Mr. Dennis Jablonski. Dennis? We knew coming into this lecture that the problem with space here on the dais, and also the number of speakers and how much time we have to participate for each one of them. And so we needed a facilitator. And when we need anything at the Community College of Allegheny County Labor Management Institute, the first person we look to is the fellow standing. Where did he go? Oh, there he is, Bill. Thought you were standing right there. All of a sudden, I thought I was going to be facilitating. The Chief Corporate Relations Officer of the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. Please welcome our facilitator, Mr. Bill Flanagan.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Great to be back here with all of you for another one of our events in the lecture series. And I want to show you right out of the gate that we have 8 people here who could each deliver a really terrific 20 or 30-minute lecture. We are not going to do that today. Instead, we decided with the ground we have to cover and the expertise on the panel, it would be better to conduct this more talk show style. And since I have a little bit of experience doing that, I was invited to help facilitate. But it's a great topic for discussion. It's certainly an important one to the future of our region. And I thought I'd set the scene a little bit before we get to the discussion. With just a couple of little background slides. When we hear from Dennis in a moment, he's going to be able to go deeper and embellish a bit more based on some new data the Allegheny Conference just released today. But we're in a really interesting position as a region right now. In some way, these are the best of times, and in some ways, these are the most challenging of times for southwestern Pennsylvania. We're certainly getting great PR, and those are just 3 examples. Forbes magazine calls Pittsburgh the new cool. Which is kind of fun. CIO magazine and the Huffington Post have recognized our region, Pittsburgh, as among the best cities for techies and tech startups, another cool thing. And niche.com, which is a website that really targets high school and college students, calls Pittsburgh a top metro for millennials. And we could have filled that screen with headlines and accolades, all from just the last year of positive national and international press that the region has been getting. And no wonder, we've engineered a remarkable comeback here over the last generation. That chart, rolls back the clock to around 1990 and really shows what's happened here in terms of total employment in the metro, in the 7 counties around Allegheny, including Allegheny County, over the last 15 years. And you can see the sharp improvement in employment in the 90s as we recovered from the steel bust of the 1980s. And then really with some ups and downs, with a great recession along the way, continued improvement in employment in the region until today. There are actually more people employed in the 10 counties of southwestern Pennsylvania today than ever before in our history. And that surprises a lot of Pittsburghers. There are tens of thousands more people working today than at the peak of the steel industry back in the 1970s. It's a very different economy. Those people do many different things than people did back in the 60s and the 70s. But nonetheless, it's a pretty remarkable story when you consider where our region started a generation ago and how far we've been able to come in terms of recovery. In fact, today, we took a look at our ImaginePittsburgh.com website this morning, 28,000 plus open jobs. So I already said there are more people working today than ever before in the region, more people employed, and 28,000 jobs to fill that are not filled with employed people right now. So clearly a lot of opportunity, but those job opportunities exist because employers are finding a hard time making a match to the workers with a skill to do the work that needs to be done. So that's one of the significant challenges in the region, and that number on a daily basis has been consistent for months, if not the last couple of years, consistently 28,000 open jobs. So with all that good news, right, more people working than ever before, we've got all these open jobs, we're getting all this great PR, why should we worry? You know, what's there to be concerned about? But as it turns out, what's to be concerned about is our demographics in the region. And this is an outdated slide. We got new data this morning, but as of yesterday, when I sent the slide over here to CCAC, we were projecting that 278,000 baby boomers are 55 plus and eligible to retire between now and 2025. It's actually, the number should be 290,000, so it's actually a little worse than our initial projections at the conference, a little more challenging. And again, over a 10-year period, the 290,000 is 22% of everybody working today in southwestern Pennsylvania. And you might think other regions, well, they're old too. You know, they have older populations, this part of the United States. Surely they're all dealing with the same issue. But if you look at the average, the national average is 19% of the workforce is 55 or older. So we are older, our older workers, our skilled workers, our knowledge workers are exiting the workforce at a significantly higher rate than the regions we compete with across the country. And that begs the issue, who's going to replace them? And this is the last slide I'm going to share with you. This just gives you a sense by generation of how the region's population looks today. So this is not workforce, this is total population, but it's organized by age group. So the gray bar on the right is 65 plus. So that's the older baby boomers and the greatest generation, the World War II generation, right? The next one down, going from right to left, is the boomers, right? Age 50 to 64. You can see we've got more than 500,000 baby boomers in our population. Then see the dip when you go to the Gen X group. That's the group next in line to take over as the boomers exit the scene. And near as we can tell, we're missing 86,000 Gen Xers from the region's population. Then you go to the millennials. The story's not too bad. Millennials, just in the last week or so, actually that generation is now larger than the baby boomers in the workforce, except in our region, where the millennial generation is smaller than the baby boom generation, although the millennial population is growing faster than the national average here. So that's a good sign. We're growing our population of young people faster than the national average. And then you get down to the blue bar on the left. That's less than 18, right? So that's all those high school seniors all the way down. And what you find is there are fewer of that group than there are millennials. There are fewer of that than there are baby boomers. And as Dennis will be able to tell you, that is a gap that is going to work its way through our population and workforce over the course of the next decade. The missing people to do the work that has to be done. It's really the challenge that we're here to talk about today. There's a skills gap today, but based on the projections we learned about this morning, that skills gap is going to remain with us for some time to come unless the region takes some significant steps to address it. So with that, I'm going to put the logo back on the screen. I'm going to find my handheld mic, and to make it easier for me, I'm going to come down here into the audience where I can see what's going on and actually see the people I'm talking to, and I'll do the discussion part down here. So the way this is going to work, we're going to talk amongst ourselves as a panel for the next half hour, 25, 40 minutes, something like that. And then we're going to open it up for questions. And the way we typically do the questions, and I think that's the normal drill, there should be index cards in the packets you were handed this morning. As a thought occurs to you, jot it down. We'll be around to collect the cards, and then after we've conducted the panel discussion, I'll go back up to the podium, and then we'll ask them the questions all of you want to have answered as well. So with that, Dennis, I'm actually going to start with you because this was a momentous day, or is a momentous day for the Allegheny Conference. Issued a big new report looking at the future of work in our region. What's that all about?
Yeah, we've been working for a year now on what we're broadly calling a supply and demand study for the region. And this morning we announced that the report is open sourced on the Allegheny Conference website as well as the Imagine Pittsburgh website. So not only the 100-page report, but all of the source tables and so forth are there. But here's what it says. Over the next 10 years, between now and the end of 2025, 102% of our workforce will be transformed. 102%. That's a little over 1.2 million people. There are three pieces to that. There will be 290,000 people in the baby boom era eligible for retirement. There'll be a conservative projection of 50,000 new jobs created during that period. And there'll be over 900,000 jobs where the people that are currently working in a job will be in a completely different job than they were before, probably retrained, upskilled, and so forth. Think about in any of your operations, over the next 10 years, on average, you're going to have to replace the entire workforce. And when you look at the supply, we have that 290 retiring, we got the 50 new, just that piece alone, that's 340,000 people. The K through 12 system is graduating on average over that next 10 years, 26,000 people a year. So if we're able to retain, train, and place at work every single student that comes out of our high school system in the 10 counties, we're 80,000 short. 80,000 short. That doesn't address a number of other obvious angles to this, but there is a huge supply and demand problem. This study goes into detail by occupation. There's 5 occupations that are studied in detail: information technology, finance and related business services, a category called engineering, science, and production, healthcare, and construction and extraction are the 5 occupation areas. And then there are 2 sectors that were looked at separately and specifically. One is energy, the other one is retail and hospitality. I will tell you that the supply and demand imbalance varies from sector to sector. Healthcare, for example, setting aside nurses as a special case, there's ample supply coming out of our schools to deal with healthcare. On many of the other sectors, nowhere near. So just to stay where we are, we're going to have to figure out how to attract, retain, or lift up at least 80,000 more people.
And Dennis, as I recall, those are conservative projections. They're not taking a leap saying, there's 300 and some thousand, replacements and new jobs, right?
I think the reality is probably really worse.
Yeah, well, because I think you're talking about the 260,000 high school seniors that will, enter the workforce over those 10 years. That's assuming 100% of them graduate from high school, right?
Well, it assumes 88% of them graduate, which is the current rate.
88%, right. So it's assuming 88% graduation. So it's still a daunting task, and some high schools don't do as well as that. So a big challenge for the region. And, Stephanie, Dennis spoke to this issue of jobs being transformed. So, yeah, people are working, they're doing the job they already did. Maybe it's similar to the job their mother or father did. Is that the way it's going to be in the future? And when he talks about transformation, what does that really mean to the world of work?
Right, so this is something that we see every day with working with employers across many industries. When we think about, let's say, manufacturing, and I know, CCAC has worked very hard on this through their mechatronics program, it's no longer someone sitting on a line and doing kind of the standard rote repetition work. Those people now on that line have to have technology skills, creativity, they have to be able to problem solve. They are probably working with fewer people, and they have to be a lot more flexible and creative in the work that they're doing. And so even that job itself has a higher complexity of skills. So one of the things we talk about frequently is that not everyone needs a 4-year degree, and we know that, and we know how successful community college is in giving us an employable workforce. But more importantly, a high school degree isn't enough. And it hasn't been enough, but even more compelling. And when you look at Dennis's data, you see that people need a high school degree plus an additional level of skills. And we see a lot more blending in our jobs across all sectors, that we need, in addition to some level of technical know-how, we need kind of these other softer skills like communications and teamwork and and problem-solving skills. And so we have a much more complex blend that we're demanding in our workforce.
Well, and that's interesting. So the job you're moving into, or even the job a person leaves, may have a different skill set for the person who comes into it than it had for the one who left, right?
Absolutely, and that is an issue, I think, as you look at our workforce, which is a bit older than most other regions in the country, is that even kind of that transferability of skills is there to an extent, but we're going to have to think a bit more creatively about how we train the next segment of the workforce. And I think all of us together need to be more creative about options for infusing the blend of skills through a variety of education and training programs.
A real challenge, though, in the workforce system. People lose their jobs for a variety of reasons. They might not quit, but companies change, they go out of business. For those dislocated workers, it would seem re-entering or finding that next step in this kind of economy gets that much more difficult.
It's a lot harder. We touch about 25,000 local job seekers a year from high school all the way up through retirement. And one of the dynamics that we've observed over the last 6 months is that the time to placement is really creeping up, which means that people coming out, and in addition, the people that we're working with are older, which means that we're taking a bunch of folks who've worked for a long time that have been very employable, and all of a sudden they're coming back out, they're dislocated, and the economy that they're going back into looks different, and it's harder to kind of get them back in. So we are trying a lot more different options, and I think the partnership here, working with companies in a much different way, in a closer way, with their education and programs, that we are going to have to work in a much better alignment to take those people and get that back in quicker and infuse those skills to them so we can get them back in a way that makes sense, because right now it's taken a long time.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that I think that what you said is in working closer with the industry is so crucially important. I've found that the best practice, those programs that CCAC particularly has that have the industry coming to us and telling us exactly what types of skills and competencies are needed, those are the most successful programs. If I can just give a short example of our Duquesne Light partnership. We've been working with Duquesne Light for years now, more than a decade. They had a need, they needed more linemen, they didn't know where they were going to come from, so they came to CCAC. So they came to us and they said, these are the competencies that we need. So we worked with them, we recruited with them, we found ample interest because the jobs are amazing, and I think it was about 99% a higher rate after they go through this program. But we continually to look at the curriculum together to integrate those soft skills that Stephanie was talking about, and it's a superb program. But they went a step further. They didn't just say, hey, we're going to help you with the supplies and we have the lab for you. But this year, they are offering scholarships to students. So I think it's when the industry puts that financial backing to a program, so it's not just the curriculum, but they say, we need these students and we're going to help get those students to your program by actually paying for the tuition. That's very successful.
Yeah, so that's the best case. You got a really great partner. They're willing to invest in the program. Do you have other training programs, though, at CCAC that nobody wants to get involved with, that you have a hard time filling the classes?
Yes, I'm sure, and some of it's a lack of knowledge. I think one of the things that is very important at CCAC is that we have opportunities for career exploration for young people beginning in middle school or before. There are a lot of jobs in today's world that young people don't realize the good career pathways there are because yesterday those good career pathways weren't there. On the other side of that coin, there are new jobs emerging every day and things like nanotechnology that young people don't even know what that is. So I think one of our real needs as a community college, or one of our real niches, is to be able to explain those things and to showcase those things and to have things like open houses that you don't just talk to kids, but you bring them in and let them see that work firsthand. Let them get their hands on it in various safe settings so that they understand what the jobs of tomorrow really are.
Yeah, and it's great that kind of stuff happens. I wonder, though, from the CCAC perspective, are there certain areas where you could train people, the jobs are there, you could get it done, you just can't get anybody to pay attention?
Yes. We have a new program. One of them is cybersecurity. It's a fantastic job outlook. We cannot get students to enroll in these classes. I mean, we have this great program that we work with experts on to deliver this and to create it, and we're canceling classes. So that's one I want to bring your attention to. The second one is, you've said IT, computer programming. We have canceled classes in the CIT, the computer classes. And we're talking about the programming. We need those, we talk about the boot camps and all these camps for kids, but it's not actually percolating into additional enrollment in these areas, which is troubling.
Yeah, Dennis, I got to go back and ask you about that. Dennis, in case you don't know, ran a software company, an artificial intelligence company for most of the early part of his career, so he knows that space. And in the report this morning, they said the big cybersecurity, right? Coding, IT skills, isn't that a huge demand area for the region?
Significant demand. The report is crystal clear about how many opportunities there are, not only in these advanced companies like Google and Uber and Duolingo, et cetera, but almost every corporation of any type and not-for-profit has a significant IT operation now, and they need IT skills virtually in every company, and more of the construction, extraction, production jobs don't require that you be a programmer, but you got to be able to work with computers and do science and math. So IT skills are literally across the board, embedded in all sectors and all occupations.
So that's an important point, though. You don't have to be a brainiac software engineer to find a good job with these skills, right?
That's correct, but it is one of the competencies that almost every employer is looking for, is those types of skills.
All right, Linda, you want to weigh in?
So I would like to weigh in. First of all, many of you probably are very aware of the Remake Learning Initiative. So much is happening in our region with creativity and innovation. But addressing the idea of coding, probably now, and when I speak for our Allegheny County schools that I work with, 42. We have about 75% of them now who have teachers who have been trained in code.org, and they are implementing a coding program in the elementary schools. So it is beginning, computer programming, you hear programs such as Scratch, etc. And oftentimes, if you're not in the schools now, you don't see some of the new and innovative programming that is taking place, but specifically addressing the IT area, I think you'd be happy to hear that, and the workforce will be happy as well.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I did a presentation up at Avonworth High School yesterday to the 9th graders, and one of my slides, I love to talk about the 3D printing and additive manufacturing industry that's taking hold here in the region. And so I put up my slide of this enormous industrial 3D printer, and I asked for a show of hands. There were probably 150 9th graders. How many of you have ever used a 3D printer? Almost all of them raised their hands. I was blown away. But is that what it's going to take? Is that part of the problem here, that kids aren't exposed to these types of skills and these types of opportunities traditionally?
So I think they now are being exposed to them, and superintendents, very happy to say, are implementing curriculum. So it's embedded. It's not an extra. It's not something that is extra. The disconnect that still exists, I believe, is now that I'm learning these skills, what can I do with them in the workplace? And what should my dream be as far as a career, even though we know that may change many times? So our challenge as educators, and the challenge I set forth with the workforce, is how can we really connect, not just talk to each other, but really let kids see what the possibilities are, because that motivates them to do more and to really want to become educated so that they can be in that position that they're dreaming of. We still know that if you ask a 7th grader what they want to be, it's still a professional athlete. We heard this morning from Dimitri, his son wants to be a hockey player. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's what kids see, and that's what they're exposed to the most in the media. And this morning I also heard parents need to be more aware so that they can help students make choices. We know that the ratio of guidance counselors to students is not a good one. So everyone in the profession, I think if we're all in this together, that message can get out, and our young children can begin to be excited about the opportunities that exist for them here in our region. And that's certainly a goal, too, to help them stay here.
And I want to come back to Stephanie and Dennis to talk a little bit more about what business and industry can do to better make the connections and make this happen. But Tim, I wanted to ask you first. Look, we're talking about enormous job opportunity, 1 million jobs. We're talking about all this training opportunity that That opens those doors. So then why is the African American unemployment rate in our region twice that of the white population? Why aren't those connections being made? And what's going on in the minority part of our population that's creating this disconnect with the opportunity that's here and that's going to grow here?
First of all, I want to thank Rick Adams for providing me tissues. Not because I'm going to cry, but that we could. But I think I'm not sure if I have a cold or getting allergies. But to your question,
That time of year.
a couple things. I think, I'm wondering, and I know some of this has happened, but I wondered, has there been a conference or just a sit-down opportunity with the various superintendents or representatives of the schools with a significant number of companies and corporations where the companies and corporations are saying, these are the skills that we need for the jobs that exist now, the jobs that we expect to exist in the next few years, since most people leave within a few years in their school, that the superintendents and the people in charge of the coursework are hearing that directly from the people who are in position to hire people. I'm wondering if one of the problems is, how many people in the room have habits?
Only come on,
5
every hand
people
has
have
to go up,
habits.
for crying out loud.
I didn't say what, but seriously, there's a way in which most people in this room, looking at the ages of a significant portion of how we were raised, how we were educated, and I'm wondering if, because it's easier for all of us to do the same thing over and over again because you don't have to think too much. Well, this is your course. This is what you do in the first period, the second period, the third period, whatever. I'm wondering if there's been a conversation for breakthrough, Bill, where people are actually sitting down and saying, how can we disrupt the educational system that exists now that has not produced the people to fill those $28,000, not 28,000, but 28,000 jobs, Dennis, that continue to exist, 20, 25, 28,000 year after year. The openings are there, but the people aren't. I worked at Mayview State Hospital for 31 3/4 years, and many of you have heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? So I'm just, this is not a criticism. Mm-hmm. We all do that. I'm wondering if the educational systems are so entrenched that we just go through what we go through. Meanwhile, you have these kids leaving school, particularly if they don't go on to college, with very few marketable skills. The other thing I'm wondering about is, has there been effective conversation with those millennials or whomever who are totally into social media to find ways to create that breakthrough so that these jobs are looked at as good jobs, good paying jobs, good opportunities for careers, and not have a certain negative stigma that maybe certain jobs have had in the past. That we create a different imagery or marketing of certain jobs and positions and how you get to those positions.
Well, Tim, let me ask for some reaction to that, because you picked up 3 really important issues. One is there a sufficient partnership between business and education, and is that part of our problem that there isn't? 2, the bureaucracy that has to be overcome within the education system, and is it truly adaptable? Is it capable of responding and adjusting to the new reality we all face? And then finally, communication. I think you started out talking about a conference of some sort, and you wound up on social media because kids communicate differently. So how about that? Linda, I'll start with you and Dennis, and maybe Stephanie wants to weigh in. Is there sufficient, and I'm going to get to the unions.
I have a comment about this, too.
Oh, okay, I'll get you on this. No, we're working our way, and I know you guys have been engaging with the schools, so I'm going to work you into this too. But let's just start right now. Is what's happening adequate? If not, why not? What needs to happen? And maybe you, Dennis, and Stephanie all want to weigh in.
So I would say what's happening is probably not adequate, but if you actually are in our schools in the region, not just Allegheny County, there are significant changes in the delivery of instruction. So that's positive. I do believe that there is still a gap between understanding the work that is being done in school and how that applies to what a student may do when they leave school, and what comes in between as far as post-secondary education. I think the other question that Bill asked was what needs to be done. Well, we focus on what is measured, and all of you evaluate our schools by the test scores, and not that they're not important. They are important, but when there's only so many hours in the day, there is a focus on subject content, not on career awareness or workforce standards, which exist and actually are very good if you look at them. But there is not a lot of time spent in the schools focusing on how we're connecting what happens in the classroom with what may happen in the workplace. So I think that's an area where we can improve.
Stephanie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so what I was going to say to kind of build on what Linda is saying is that there is a significant network of organizations working with youth outside the classroom, and I think that's a real opportunity for all of us to recognize that while the schools are very constrained by resources and time and the incentives that they have, that there are hundreds of local organizations that are thinking about how to support these youth externally. And so that's where I see, and our organization and many of us up here work with those organizations to figure out how after school, do you first of all make after school time worthwhile, so you're doing career exploration or taking them to a business or doing things with them outside of the classroom that's important, making their summers worthwhile by all of us. We worked together to put 2,000 youth in jobs last summer. We're doing it again, and those are in multiple sectors, across companies, across the region, and diverse opportunities. But the other piece of it, and I think that Jason down there will probably address this, is we have to also recognize that youth have different pathways and that every youth is not going to go in the same place and is not coming from the same place. And so we have to be really vigilant about opening the doors, many different doors along many pathways for youth that are coming from a different place, that are challenged to get through school in the same way, and that need to have more of us outside the school systems and others supporting them into unconventional types of opportunities for their future.
All right, well, you referenced our guys from labor down here at the end, so I know, Jim, you wanted to weigh in on that and kind of your take on where we've gotten so far. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to point out, there are actually two things. But first, I also, besides running an apprenticeship program in a labor union, I sit on the state's Workforce Development Board, and I'm actually chairman of the Youth Committee, and this is a conversation we've been having for the last 6 to 8 months. One thing that I never knew and just recently became aware of is that the state in the education code has a thing called Plan 339, which actually requires school districts to put together a plan, K through 12, for career guidance and orientation. And it's also supposed to create an advisory board at each of those schools that consists of teachers, the educators, parents, and community members from business and other areas to give guidance in the various careers. There are a few schools in the state of Pennsylvania that have done this and have done it successfully. There are still other schools that have put a plan together yet have never implemented the plan, because in reality it comes down to time and money, most importantly money. So there is a structure and a requirement in place in the state of Pennsylvania for our schools, K through 12, to do this, that is not being enforced for a lot of reasons, and there really are no metrics or measurement of whether it's happening or being successfully done. So there is an opportunity. But I will say the biggest hurdle you have, in my opinion, and I used to blame the guidance counselors, but you get a big high school, 2 guidance counselors, they're in there to do crisis management, they're overworked, they're totally understaffed, they really can't give guidance, counseling advice, they're problem solvers. But it's the parents. We'll go in, Jason goes in, we make presentations all the time about the solid careers in the trades. We have kids, middle school, high school, about to graduate that say, hey, I like this. This is a good way to earn a good living, and it's a lifetime career. They go home and they say to mom or dad, I want to be an operating engineer. And pardon me, but what they normally hear is like hell, you're going to college. We have done such a good job. My dad was guilty of it. I'm guilty of it with my kids, of convincing ourselves that in order to be successful, you have to have a college degree, not post-secondary education, a college degree. And if you do not have that, you are not going to be successful. So ultimately what ends up happening is parents, because they don't have the information and knowledge, automatically channel their kids, irregardless of what the kid wants, into college, and that's where they end. And then hopefully Jason and I are able to catch a few of them as they fall out of that, the first or second year after their parents have spent money. They decide that doesn't work, we try to get them into the trades. But there is a program in the state education to do this, but the biggest hurdle is we've got to have a societal change with parents to convince them that jobs in manufacturing, jobs in the construction industries, in extraction, natural gas, are both good paying and lifetime careers.
Yeah, Jason, so how's that going? I think when I saw you this morning at the briefing on the new report, you were heading off to go talk to a school about this issue. And the trades have really been trying hard to break in there. And you feel like you're making headway?
No, I think we are. I really do. I just came from Bellevue and Avalon elementary schools talking to 5th graders. I mean, we often get invited out to career fairs, which are wonderful at the high schools, but oftentimes you're talking to kids who already have made their minds up what they want to do. I mean, I think this all does come down to career awareness and career readiness. And I don't think kids, particularly in the city, really get exposed to career awareness. The CTCs throughout Allegheny County are very good. I mean, and throughout the region, quite frankly. And Eric Heasley's here from Beatty, and I'm sure there may be other CTCs director here. They're outstanding programs. They really are. They really are exposing kids to plumbing and carpentry, and not too much into the heavy equipment, but a lot of the trades. But the city is very, very much lacking in that respect. And if there's one area that really should have kept their CTC up, it was the city of Pittsburgh. Now they are bringing back a little bit. We have 2 programs in carpentry at Westinghouse and Carrick, and they still have an HVAC program, I believe, at Alderdice. So they're starting to ramp it up a little bit. But kids don't have any idea what construction work is all about. Even this morning talking to the 5th graders, well, what's a construction worker? Well, I don't know, they fix things, Well, tell me the different types of construction workers, like an operating engineer, like a steam fitter, like a sheet metal worker, like an insulator, like a cement. I mean, they're all different occupations. I think everyone wants to just say everyone's a construction worker, and there's all these different trades that make up construction. So there's that awareness of what the opportunities are out there. And then it's the understanding of what it takes to work in this industry. And yes, it is the soft skills like communication skills and problem solving and teamwork and things like that. But it's also just an understanding that, you may have to drive 35 miles to get to work today, or 50 miles to get to work today. And that, we get a lot of folks that get into our apprenticeship programs. We take in about 1,000 a year. This year we'll probably take in about 1,100, which is about as many as we've taken at least in the last 10 years. And a lot of these folks will get in and about 65% will make it to the second year, but a lot of those that get out just realize this isn't at all what they thought it was going to be. That there's a lot more to being work ready and having that, work ethic to show up every day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the city needs to do a little bit more in getting people to be aware of it. And there are then some requirements that really have problems in the city, and it starts with the driver's license, in my opinion. That you have to have a driver's license to work in our industry. And so many of the kids in the city, there's no driver's ed. And I'm going to be meeting with the Pittsburgh Promise on Monday, seeing if there's some way that, the promise is great, again, trying to push everyone to college, but the money you were going to give a kid for tuition, maybe we can give some money to that kid to let him learn how to drive.
Consider that part of the post-secondary education. Yeah, Tim, did you want to follow up on that?
Just real quick.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, James, your Plan 339, K through 12, that's, you say is a requirement statewide. Maybe we need to implement what's already on the books to assist us, because, let's be honest, I was at a school in Homewood today working on our Coalition Against Violence work. We're having several youth summits coming up. And as I've said more than once, part of the roots of violence, among the strongest roots, is the absence of access to jobs or entrepreneurial opportunities. And I think we're selling our own kids short if we're not enforcing what's already on the books that is going to expose kids who may not by nature want to go to college, but they want to work legally. They want to have a job. They want to have a career. And maybe one thing can come out of this opportunity for what I call running of the mouth. That's what we're doing. That we actually have some concrete thoughts, and maybe I would certainly be willing to partner with you, if you're open, that we look across Pennsylvania and locally how we can move this thing that's on the books into reality so that some of these kids actually will hear of and see opportunities that they may not know otherwise.
Yeah, it sounds like, and Dennis, this goes back to one of the big recommendations in the reports, too, that employers can't just wait for the educators to figure this out, and there's a real responsibility on employers to engage more directly with the schools. Sounds like they're saying that's really critical, and that's on the top of mind at the conference as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was a clear recommendation in the report. The words that were used, as I recall, is that the industry and business need to become investors in talent, not consumers of talent. They need to have a completely different attitude about the whole thing and invest. And that investment takes a number of different forms, not just workforce development programs, but career readiness, career awareness. There's a whole range of things they need to do. And better alignment was the other word that came out quite a bit. How do we get the education system from K through 12 all the way through higher ed and the opportunities that are out there in the business world aligned, so that more and more people are getting the training that they need to be able to take not just a job, but a whole range of jobs by getting the right skills.
Yeah, Linda, I wonder from your perspective in CCACs, what more you all need from the business side to make this better than it is now.
So first of all, I just want to address real quickly 339 plans. In Allegheny County, by the end of this year, we will be pretty much complete with every school district having a plan. And that was a step in the right direction. We brought in people to work through the CTCs as well as our school districts. So that's a first step to actually have it in place this school year, 2016. And the consultants will actually come back next school year to help refine them. So that's a first step. The second step is making sure they are properly implemented, and, as I was whispering to Dennis, to really recognize those schools that are, because oftentimes that peer pressure helps everyone to get on board. The second thing that I just wanted to mention very quickly is how we can partner better. Recently, a couple of months ago, through the state, I went to visit Nashville. And the city of Nashville had a true partnership with business and the education system. And they kind of put aside their differences, and no one told each other what needed to be done. But instead, they had a vision for what needed to occur because of the workforce. And they made changes, both in their career technical programs, so that they did away with programs, even though, that wasn't great for jobs, but people moved into other areas that weren't in demand in the region. So the focus, K through 12, was on career pathways and true paths and understanding of students to getting to the careers that existed in the workforce in the region. And it took about 10 years for it to occur, but certainly an amazing effort of everyone working together with a common vision. And I think we can learn from that.
I believe that CCAC does a very good job connecting with K through 12. We have our articulation agreements with the SOAR. We have articulation agreements with our four-year institutions. What we really need is we need more industry support in internships and co-ops. I think those are integral to a student's success and really understanding what that job entails. And I see people nodding their heads. Last week we had a very successful Advanced Manufacturing Mechatronics Advisory Board. They came out to our West Hills Center. We had 30 manufacturers that were there. So that is a unique situation where we're starting to move towards that. But many industries, we do not have internships and co-ops. And we really need those to help our students to give them that experience, that work experience. So they can put that on their resumes. They can say, yes, I do have some work experience.
Well, any guess out of a universe of 100 students, how many of them have access to that sort of experience, and how many of them would take advantage of it if they could, if employers partnered more effectively?
Well, the best thing that we're starting to do with our curriculum is that we're putting it as a requirement within the actual program. So they have to do that in order to graduate, and those are the most successful ones. Mechatronics has that. Some of our other programs are starting to integrate and putting that actual requirement into the program. If it's optional, students do not do optional. We will have the high achieving students that will sort of come to us and we'll find the internships, but that's one solution that I see, is putting more of those internships and co-ops as requirements within the programs themselves.
Stephanie, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, because it's one of the things that came up in the report that was issued today by the conference, that this whole idea of training people, upskilling people into all these technology-intensive jobs, and you're working on something called, what is it, Tech Hire? That's
Right.
really designed to address this?
Right. So this is actually a national dynamic that we can assume that this infusion of technology skills across all sectors is something occurring nationally. And so the White House got some engagement in this and put out some funds, and then the state replicated that. And so we're developing a partnership with the Allegheny Conference and with the PASHE 14 state-owned universities to implement some opportunities for more of a technology pathway, and starting to actually think more about how we can help build a pipeline of individuals across the more established companies like the hospitals, the insurance companies, the supermarket chains that need workers with those technology skills, and not necessarily just the new economy businesses. And so we want to put into place some real established systems that will give us a pipeline of workers again and again and again through the schools and working in close partnership with companies.
You know, I think about when we talk about the populations here in the city, especially the one that Tim is working with, the ones that may not have a driver's license, so the construction industry may not be a great possibility. The beauty of these types of tech-enabled jobs is the concentration of those occupations in the city must be through the roof. I would think there's a huge opportunity here for people to get upskilled into those jobs.
Yes, absolutely. We're partners in the Tech Hire Initiative also. There are opportunities for upskilling, and part of what Workforce Development does at CCAC is take people who have been either displaced or want to move up in their current career and be able to add additional training, additional skill sets to enable them to do that. That's particularly critical with older workers that have a good history of work experience, many years of coming to work on time, working well with people, but the job they were in has disappeared. And so the retraining to be able to get them current skills to meet today's jobs is absolutely critical. And one comment I would make about the internships, I think our health sciences programs with their clinical components offer a very good model for that. Historically, all of those careers have required clinicals in order to finish your degree. That's the same concept as putting internship and co-ops into things like mechatronics.
So a lot of potential there. Now, hopefully you've all been filling out your cards and you have questions, because I'm going to move up to the podium and somebody will be around to collect any questions, and we'll move to that part of the program. But as I'm making the move, Dennis, I do want to ask you, what's at stake for our region if we don't come to grips with this, certainly better and more aggressively than we have been to date?
Well, what's at stake is a number of different things. I mean, one, the companies here that are global and have operations elsewhere will eventually expand somewhere else as opposed to expanding here. That's one. Two, we've got 5% unemployment You can do the math on how many people that is. We have a whole group of people that have been left behind, yet we have needs. So if we don't include them in the solution, that's an implication. And finally, all the things that we love about Pittsburgh, sports, arts, culture, et cetera, if our population continues to shrink, you can't take those things for granted. We're not always going to be able to sustain them if the population gets smaller as a result of this. So I think there's a lot at stake. Matter of fact, our members think this is the most important strategic issue, and they've asked us to put it at the top of the list in terms of our work.
Tim, one quick one, and then we'll move to the questions. Yeah.
Thank you. We would be remiss. There's a big old elephant in the room. Nothing to do with Republicans, by the way. But Dennis just spoke of an absence of sufficient numbers of potential workers. There's an excess of people of color in the prisons. The President of the United States has indicated months ago of an initiative to begin to let folks out who have committed crimes that are of a lower nature in terms of not being physically offensive to people, destructive. One of the members of the Corporate Equity and Inclusion Roundtable from the mayor's office, Orlando Ricardo, sent this to me recently. We hope you will be at the Corporate Equity and Inclusion Roundtable June 20th at Duquesne University. There's a flyer in your folder. The White House launches the Fair Chance Business Pledge, and it mentions several companies that have taken on the pledge that the president has requested them to take on. The president says a lot of time records or a record disqualifies you from being a full participant in our society, even if you've already paid your debt to society. It means millions of Americans have difficulty even getting their foot in the door to try and get a job, much less actually hanging on to the job. That's bad not only for the individuals, it's bad for our economy. And he's listing several major corporations that are buying into this pledge called the Fair Chance Business Pledge. So corporate equity, we've had many conversations over the past year on Ban the Box. Last year, those of you who attended the summit at Duquesne University, you saw a joint letter from the mayor and the county exec on signing on to Ban the Box. Recently, I heard in this very room, Dr. Bullard, that some of the people who were on this very stage was a couple weeks ago stated that they found many of the employees who were hired through such a concept of accepting Ban the Box or accepting the Fair Pledge, that they're finding a lot of these people to actually be better workers. Not all, but many, because they know they're being looked at. They know they may not have a second chance or a third chance. So they're actually showing up and performing better than some people who have no records. Now be clear, I'm not saying all people with records perform better than those not. But if you think about it, there's some logic to that. And if we don't have through universities, colleges, nonprofits, and corporations and companies, Bill, we will be leaving out thousands of potential workers who can take on these job opportunities that exist and have the training and be given the license issues, be given the structure for support so they can be successful and help fill those 28,000 jobs that you say exist.
Yeah, Tim, well, it's a good point. I know the report this morning really spoke to the issue of our region because of the demographics and the 80,000 gap. We really can't afford to waste anybody here who has the capability to be able to contribute to the economy. And it doesn't matter where they're coming from or what they do. If they want to work and they can get the skills, we have to find a way to open those doors because the numbers are really pretty daunting when you look at our population trends and demographics. One of the questions, and it's for the unions, I was expecting to get this one for Jason and Jim. You know, what are the unions doing to get more African Americans into the unions, and once in, to get them help them get experience so that they can get better jobs, remain in union jobs, and really turn it into a career? Are you making headway in that area with the African American community?
Well, that's the great model about the construction industry and the partnership between labor and management. I mean, here we are at the Bob Mill Labor Management Institute and talking about labor management. No place do you see that better than in the construction industry, where the two organizations have partnered to provide not just tuition-free training as part of our 17 apprenticeship programs, but I mean, it's all based primarily on on-the-job training. So we're not just training them, we're giving them jobs. Now they're earning those jobs, I should say. And then they're learning and advancing over a 3 to 5 year period as they advance through the apprenticeship program. And then those employers, I mean, provided those employers have work, which is a totally different issue we're having right now, they'll have that career for the rest of their life. And then if they want to be foreman, they want to be a superintendent on a job site, we'll send them to CCAC. They'll take a class or get an associate's degree in estimating or field supervision. I always forget what the name of the particular program is. But they'll get their associates. So those opportunities in the building trades have always been there in terms of free training, career placement with contractors, and pension and health care and the whole bit.
Yeah, but what I was going to point out too is I think we work very hard at minority recruitment. I mean, we partner, I can only speak for the operating engineers, we partner with Breaking the Chains of Poverty out of the A. Philip Randolph Institute and have taken individuals out of that program. Ron Sapp, who's sitting back here, is running the Introduction to the Trades program up at the Energy Innovation Center. Ron was a vice president of my local. Again, we're doing what we can because in my industry, and I think in the building trades in general, your race, your sex, none of that has anything to do with whether you're good or bad at what we do. You can be a great operator, you can be a great carpenter, whatever it is. It's all about do you have the skill set necessary to do the particular job. And in my case, it comes down to spatial concepts and hand-eye coordination and mechanical aptitude. So we're aggressively going into all the communities, irregardless, to try to look for the best candidates for the opportunities there. So I think we do an exceptional job, and we work very hard at it on a daily basis.
Although I got to tell you, I had Lou from the Carpenters Union on the TV show at the beginning of the year, and we're sitting there talking about opportunities in the trades. And I said, oh yeah, we're working hard to get people into union carpentry, and we need a lot of people, and we're expanding our apprenticeship programs, and it's really great. And I said, well, yeah, because it's great, because you can get out of high school, you have basic math skills, and you're ready to go. And he said, oh yeah, basic math skills, algebra, and some trigonometry. And I said, shoot, I wouldn't be a union carpenter. So these trades are not, you need sharp people.
You have to have a skill set, and some of that we can teach, some of it you need. In order to get into my program, you do have to take a series of tests. And it's basic math. I don't think we go do a little bit of algebra and that. Well, to run a crane, you have to be able to program a computer in the crane. I mean, technology has changed. But basic math, basic English comprehension, because you do have some studying. The big one for us to make it into my program, hand-eye coordination. I mean, you have to have that. You don't want somebody pulling the levers on a crane that doesn't have good hand-eye coordination. A lot of people get hurt real quick. So, but you're right. But it's about we're trying. Look, we do have a reputation as being, not the best place for minorities or for women, and some of that is deserved from the past. But what I can tell you, I firmly believe, and I know for the operating engineers, that attitude has changed. Now, has it changed on every job site? No. But we're working real hard on that part too. But in the recruitment phase, I'm just looking, and I firmly believe this, I'm looking for good, qualified operating engineers, because that's what makes our contractors money, that gives me the ability to go on and negotiate good wages and benefits for them. And again, like I said, we also work with a lot of these organizations even to do the things like get people driver's license. We do that with DeWitt at Breaking the Chains. How do we get inner city kids driver's license? Those kids never sat on a riding lawnmower, let alone on a big piece of equipment, so we've got to get that transition, but we work hard to do that.
Yeah. Jason, did you want to, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because I'm the only black person sitting here, so I have to, extra, I'm just kidding. I can't help I was black. But take that, please. We have to work together. Thank you very much. I want I want to share something with everybody because this is a sensitive subject, and I've been dealing with this stuff for literally 45 plus years, even though I'm only 45. Thank you very much. But there's historic frustration from the African American community about the trades. And I say that, but I also say in recent years, I honestly believe many of the folks leading this, he was with me at a press conference recently where we announced our new Black Political Empowerment Project website, bpep.net, b-pp.net, where we're putting job opportunities, training opportunities, and internships on the website, along with the community calendar and many other things. What I want people to know in this room, those of us who are of color in this room, how many people, when you drive by a construction site, it's like breathing. You just count. How many black folks are on there? You may count a female or two, but it's like, how many, seriously, all the folks who have color, do you not just automatically, I have Rich Fitzgerald now counting black people as he drives by construction sites because historically, I mean, I know it's kind of funny, but it's true. We can't, am I right? We can't help it because historically we don't see many people of color in these sites. So I'm wondering how we can, because I think we're at a moment now where I do believe there are folks who are not of color who have a commitment. I said he stood with us when we announced and their opportunities for training and jobs are going up on that website. How can we market this better so that more people of color will actually believe there is an opportunity, there will be fair and opportunity for training, there will be support systems so that people of color who have not been in the trades in significant numbers will begin to be seen on a regular basis and women be seen on a regular basis, so it's not an exception. But now that I've said that, all of you in this room, when you go by a construction site, you will now start to look and count the number of black people and maybe the number of women, and you will notice there is a dearth. But hopefully we can all partner together, and you stood right with me, and I appreciated that very much, more than you may know, that we're saying we're going to do this together. So maybe the exploration of how can we make this a reality and not a conversation.
Okay, it's probably a separate lecture series, so somebody write that down. We can get into that for another.
I got to respond
a real quick
a little bit.
Response to that.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, we do take it extremely serious, and we're very aggressive in getting out, particularly in the inner city and to urban areas in general, to spread the word about those career opportunities. We've been measuring it very closely for the last 10 years. That's how long I've been in my position. And 10 years ago, we probably had about 6% of our apprentices were minorities or women. This year, it's about 13%. It has gone up almost every year. So, and when you look at the demographics of where we are recruiting from, which is all of Western Pennsylvania, oh no, it's if you want to talk about the carpenters, they've got 57 counties in Pennsylvania. They got all West Virginia, Washington, D.C., and 9 counties in North Carolina. But they're the exception to the rule. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, even in Western Pennsylvania, our demographics actually line up pretty good. But it goes again to the awareness of what it means to work in construction. You don't work on a job site where you live necessarily. You're working for a contractor. So minorities that live in the Hill, they may be working in Beaver and Butler County. And that contractor isn't going to let his employees go, his good minority employees go, so that they can be seen working on a city project. There's also the issue of, is it a union or a non-union job, Tim? And I know that there's folks, and Harold McDonald will be real quick to bring this one up, that many of the job sites in the city of Pittsburgh have been non-union in the past. So it's important that the city officials and the county officials and others recognize that, hey, listen, we need to support union construction, because these guys do get it. They're committed to a diverse workforce, and they've got the records and they've got the work history to show it. But if you go to a work site and you don't see the minorities, it doesn't mean we're not taking them in. They just may be working at a different job site, or again, it could be a non-union.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the visibility issue. If Shell ultimately decides to proceed with its big cracker project up in Beaver County, the whole construction workforce is moving north. You're not going to see anybody in the city of Pittsburgh.
I did have one final comment. I have to say it, and part of this is applicants. I mean, we can only draw from who applies. So, in 2016, we had 1,006 individuals apply for our apprenticeship program. 859 were white males, 78 were minority males, 58 white females, and 11 minority females. So in reality, part of the problem is, and I don't know if I think we're doing a good job, if we're not doing a good enough job letting people know what's out there, but if the application rate is low, and then again, remember, we're looking for apprentices for 36 counties, 33 in PA and 3 in Ohio. So it becomes a bit of a challenge when the numbers of the total applicant process are not real high within the minority community, whether that's race or sex. So that's another hurdle we're trying. I'll be honest, we're trying to figure out how to get over. And I'll be the first to tell you, we don't have the answer. I don't have the answer, and we continue to work on that.
Yeah, and I wanted to roll with this because a number of the questions I got were related to the African-American disparity issues, so I thought this was really an important conversation. But I want to let Stephanie weigh in because we focused almost entirely on construction, and I know the WIB really focuses a lot on these populations and all the other opportunity in the region, and one of the questions was, what's being done to make those connections and open those doors as well?
Sure. So, I mean, just not to get the unions off the hook, but this is a dynamic across our entire base of employment. So we have about 5 to 7% of individuals in our labor market working are African American, but our population is more like 12%. So we have, and those, what we know about that is that those individuals are making lower wages, which tells us that they are in lower skills, or they're not being elevated into high-paying occupations. And so this is a challenge across our entire employment base that we have to address. And so what are some of the things that we can do? I mean, first of all, we do realize we have to start early, and this is a partnership with the schools that Linda and I have discussed many times, is that we have to make sure that those youth who are of color are graduating, that are reading well, that they're writing well, that they have the math skills, and so we can start early to make sure that their education is getting them to a place that makes sense. But in addition, we have to be extremely creative about making sure those applicant pools are what they are. And one of the things that we've done is create a network of 80 local workforce organizations who touch individuals across all of our communities. And we brought them together with companies, we do it monthly, and we brought them together over many, many months to say, you know, there's barriers here in getting the application pools of the companies to a place that reflects the population. And so what do we have to do? And what we learned is many community organizations don't understand that there are computer-based tracking systems and screening systems, and that resumes aren't reflecting, you know, the right words in there, and that we had to actually start creating this bridge. And through that model, we've employed about 1,000 people in the last couple of years, and about 40% of those were minorities. And so we've been really effective at working at the neighborhood and community level, but that gap has to be bridged in real time with companies talking directly to the community, and the community also understanding how business works today and how we have to teach people how to apply for jobs online, how to work the system, how to make sure that you are getting those skills, and how you're also, you know, working on those issues like criminal backgrounds and other things, driver's licenses like we're hearing about. So it's a multifaceted challenge, but it gets back to the theme that keeps emerging here, is that this partnership at the local level with employers at the table is critical to helping us bridge this divide of what's bringing people into the workforce.
Yeah, well, it goes back to something Tim said in the beginning, too, which is that employers need to be in the schools talking to these inner city kids about real jobs and what occupation, like what the trades are trying to do. But you got to see the employers in there and really bring it home to the children as to, you know, what they could do with their education. I want to, another question from the audience here, and it really speaks to the journey we've been on as a region over the last generation. You know, there were enormous retraining needs here 30, 35 years ago with the collapse of the steel industry. I remember one of the first stories I covered when I moved to Pittsburgh in the early 1980s was a story at CCAC training dislocated steelworkers to become nurses, I think, or nursing assistants. And you know, that was a big, big push. And the question is, so you look at that, you look at where we came, and that was an era when we lost 250,000 manufacturing jobs in the space of about 3 years. So think of that challenge compared to the one we have right now. But the question from the audience is, you know, are we better prepared to deal with this now in terms of our workforce delivery system, development system? We've painted a pretty dysfunctional picture, I think, so far. So let's give people some confidence that we've figured some of this stuff out and we are able to respond to the challenge that Dennis laid out for us in the beginning.
I think we are much better prepared. We have better partnerships with all of the people at the table, with the from CCAC standpoint, we're partners with K-12, we're partners with the university, we're partners with the workforce system, we're partners with economic development units, and I think the region brings all of those folks together to have discussions like this in a regular basis, and that's the only solution, because any of us acting alone are not going to be entirely effective. And the only way we're going to get forward as a region is for us to all work together.
Bill, one of the things that we're most proud of with the Corporate Equity Inclusion Roundtable is on June 20th, we'll have some of the people share some of the positives. We want to leave not totally discouraged, because, you know, when you have these conversations, you can leave depressed and need medication. Let's be honest. And we can be depressed for a few minutes on the 20th, but we want to leave. And I know Dennis and I have talked about it over cereal a year ago or so of Cheerios, of really having people hear success stories, unique combinations. And one of the things that came out of the first corporate equity event in 2013 was the Holy Family Academy really deciding. Sister Linda was there from the Holy Family Institute, and she was so excited by that first event, Dennis. She said, we've been thinking about something, but we're going to really move on this. And a lot of the kids, many of whom are African American, not all, but many, they began to be placed while in high school, one day a week, with various companies and corporations. Also out of the summit came the airport authority actually taking African American kids out to the airport, and I think they may have even put on an airplane. Don't quote me, but I think I heard that. But the neat thing was that Stephanie, or Samantha, was very excited about was a lot of these kids were exposed to careers that they never knew existed. And how are you going to be excited about a career if you never heard about it? I, like a lot of African Americans at my age, was the first person to graduate from college. A lot of people say that at a certain age. Many of us never saw people in certain careers. You have a lot of folks who have generations of attorneys, generations of doctors, and you have some people coming from our African American communities, and for that matter, from poor white communities. They have no history of seeing that. So how are they going to be excited or being incentivized to emulate their uncle, their father, their grandfather, because those samples or examples, I should say, don't exist. So what I'm saying is, I would like to see this coming year, Dennis, more companies and corporations take on bringing our young people in, it doesn't cost them much, into internships in their companies, in their corporations, so they get exposed, they get trained. And one of the things will be shown on the 20th in the video is that any of you are willing to help sponsor financially, thank you very much. But we're going to show an initiative where some young African Americans were brought in as interns. They became employees. And that's really the goal.
Well, that's an important pathway. Stephanie, you've been looking like you've been itching to weigh in on.
I was just going to say, I mean, I was responding to your point about, is it all just doom and gloom? And I wanted to say just a couple points on that. Number one, we have one of the strongest economies nationally, and our unemployment rate has fared so much better than any place in the country over the last several years. And I think one of the things that I hear about when I travel around and speak to like regions is, when you have such a low unemployment rate, the challenges are harder because the people left to employ are that much more complicated. So we've actually sort of, in some ways, achieved what is hard for many other regions, which is we've got a generally flowing base of labor, of folks coming in and out of jobs, of a diversified economy that has reinvented itself, as Bill spoke about, since the steel decline into many different vibrant sectors. And now it's kind of the 80,000 people left in our unemployment base are those people who are the hardest to employ. The second point about that is positive is that our labor force participation rate is going up, which means that those people are feeling encouraged to come back out and look for jobs. So sometimes when your unemployment rate is low, it's because people stop looking. The fact is people are looking more than ever right now because they're encouraged encouraged that there's opportunity here. So I take those on the broad scale economic indicators, we look pretty good. And our wages are also somewhat starting to creep up. So I think all of those broad things are saying Pittsburgh's in a really great place, but we have we want to make sure that everybody is benefiting from that, which is I think why all of us collaborate to say those 80,000 people that are out, we need to bring them in as well, because it's an imperative to our region, our businesses need it, and those people also need to be given a chance.
Yeah,
so I think there's a lot of good news as well.
Jason?
And I would also, to paint the picture nice and rosy as well, I mean, from a construction industry, we've been investing incredibly large sums of money over the last 10 years in our training facilities. So we are more than ready to train as many folks as the region needs. I mean, it started probably about 7 or 8 years ago when the plumbers, and many of you probably have never seen their school, but it's in North Fayette off of West Montour. Beautiful facility. I mean, I can't remember what they spend on it, but that was followed by the carpenters who built about a $14 million training center, which everybody sees out on the Parkway West. The operators just recently, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, completely rebuilt their training center. What, about $18 million? 8.1, well, inflation. $8.1 million. But the steam fitters, they're in the process of building a $20 million training facility up in Butler County. The insulators just opened their new training center in Beaver County. The electricians have just added a whole new section for instrumentation trainings, which is so critical for the natural gas industry, for example. So the investment that the building trades make and their contractors, again, that's why they're joint apprenticeship schools, we spend about $20 to $30 million worth of private money every year on training. So we are prepared from that perspective. Our challenge, though, is we can only put people to work if we have the jobs to send them to. Jim just mentioned that he had 1,000 applications last year. He had about 800 or 100 positions he could fill at that time. I'm sure he could have taken in more than 100 if we had the jobs to send them to. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg theory. You almost have to wait till the problem hits to start solving it, but that's too late. We realize that. It's like this cracker. I mean, if we knew for sure that was being built in 6 months, we could really start ramping up taking people in. But it doesn't do us any good to bring people in to train them for free for them, not for us. It costs us a lot of money to train somebody, to bring them in and invest in training them and not have a job to send them to. They're going to get disillusioned, they're going to leave the industry, they're going to leave the region, and they're going to just be bad-mouthing, saying, those unions, all they wanted was my dues. So it's a real struggle to try to figure out when's the right time to train people, how many to train. The interest is there. Again, just the number of applications proves that. But the good news is we're ready. We just have to figure out when to start bringing those people in.
Yeah, so the structure is interesting. I think I told this story at one of our earlier events. One of the great things that's happened since we hosted the G20 a few years ago, I think we've hosted 40 visiting delegations from cities all over the United States, benchmarking Pittsburgh, wanting to come here to see what we're doing right. And I had a group I met at the airport. This is a few years ago. I think they were from Oklahoma, somewhere down south. And we go driving down the Parkway West, driving into town. I'm kind of narrating their welcome to Pittsburgh. And we pass the big Carpenter Training Center. And I point up on the hill and I said, that is the Carpenters Training Center, and they do some amazing things up there, and our building trades in the region have all these incredible training centers. We got downtown, and the one guy from the Chamber of Commerce got off the bus, and he said, we've done these trips all over the United States, and that's the first time I've ever heard anybody from a Chamber of Commerce say anything nice about the unions. Partnership here, and the training facilities are astounding if more people really appreciated that and could take advantage of it. Linda, do you want to weigh on this, on what we're doing right?
I just wanted to talk about the positive things. As we have had recently people from all over the country come in to see what is happening with our schools in these innovative and creative initiatives, what they are most astounded by is how everyone knows each other. So not just educators knowing other educators, but how we do know people from the universities, the Allegheny Conference, the workforce. We are all looking at things together and I think very committed to what's happening in the region. And this morning, the Allegheny Conference kind of put out that sense of urgency of what might happen or what will happen in the region unless we do something. And being a Pittsburgher, I think we always step up to the plate to accept that challenge and will work together to do what is necessary to make it right.
All right, Dennis, I'm going to give you the last word for the panel because that's pretty much where you wrapped things up this morning. What has to happen next? We now know the scale of the challenge. We know the scale of the opportunity. So what does the conference, the business community, and the community in general need to do?
Well, I said it earlier, and I'll just repeat it. It's an all-hands-on-deck effort. As you said, all of the various sectors and entities need to be involved. And the solution is pretty straightforward. We need to lift up as many of the people in unemployment or underemployment as possible and get them trained and into work. We need to retain more of our college graduates. By the way, we retain about 42% of our four-year degree grads and about 62% of our two-year degree grads. That might sound good. It's one of the lower retention rates in the country relative to other major metros. And we need to attract more people in. We need to be able to do all three successfully to deal with this supply and demand gap. That being said, I'm very confident we're going to be able to do it. We've got engaged CEOs, we've got jobs, we've got a community that works together historically, and we just have to keep doing what we do well.
Yeah, and you know, Dennis started out talking about the challenge of the 300,000 or so people leaving the workforce, new jobs being created, the 900,000 other jobs that need to be transformed. I don't know if you all did the addition, but that adds up to a more than million job challenge when I do the math. It's a million job challenge for employers and educators to meet this demand over the next 10 years. But there's another way to look at the number and think about the kids we're talking about today, because that's a million job opportunity for people who have the right skills to do the work that needs to be done, and that's an opportunity we have not been able to offer here in southwestern Pennsylvania in a generation or more. So with that, thanks to our panel for everything they've done and all their insights. It's
Bill, could you give a shout out for
I'm sorry, which?
June 20th? The corporate equity on June 20th?
Oh, yeah, June 20th. Tim's mentioned it a couple of times, the corporate equity. I'm going to invite Dr. Bullock up here for a few closing remarks. Just one note, you all have an evaluation form. Please fill it out. Thank you, and please welcome Dr. Bullock to wrap this thing up.
Please join me in giving a big round of applause to Bill Flanagan for the outstanding job he did with today's forum. I'd like to also acknowledge and ask you to join me in thanking our great panel who presented excellent information to help us come to the task and to address the charge at hand and to address the question, are we better prepared to respond to the challenges to support the future supply and demand? And also, it also stated with the need for business and industry to invest in helping develop the talent to align our K through 12 and higher education with business and industry to ensure that we are producing and developing programs that respond and support their workforce needs, and to infuse technology across all sectors so that more and more students are integrating technology in the entire career sector. So you can see that Pittsburgh has some great opportunities ahead. But in order for us to achieve this task, it's going to require collective work, working collaboratively to really embrace the challenge, identify the strategies, and go forth to achieve the task. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, our faculty and staff, and our advisory committee for the Labor Management Institute, I want to thank everyone for coming today. This is one of many initiatives that we will be offering in the coming months. We ask that you look forward to the next announcement that we have. And I'm going to reiterate, you have an assessment. We ask that you please evaluate today because this helps us prepare for the next sessions and make the improvements or modifications as needed. For our panelists, we have a small token of appreciation. And it's a treat that I think you will like from one of our very own Toffee Taboo. So we ask that each one pick up one as you leave. And again, join me in giving our panel a round of applause. And thank you to you for supporting us today. This concludes our program.